When my twin and I left the orphanage, all that awaited us was our uncle's property, but what we found in the well there, it wasn't just about the land. It was about a debt that had nothing to do with money, and a truth that cost more than we could ever imagine. This is the story of how we inherited a ruin, and in its heart, found a home. If you've ever felt lost, like you were starting from a place so far behind everyone else, then I need you to stay with me for this. Hit that subscribe button because we're building a community here for people who know what it's like to fight for a place to belong. The gate of the St. Jude's Home for Children closed behind us with a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't a loud slam, not a dramatic finality like in the movies. It was a tired, metallic sigh, a sound of surrender. For 18 years, that sound had been the rhythm of our lives. The morning groan as the delivery trucks arrived, the midday click as social workers came and went, the evening shudder as the locks were set for the night. Now, for the first time, Alara and I were on the outside of it, and the sound was meant to signify freedom. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like falling. We stood on the cracked pavement, two identical duffel bags at our feet, containing the sum total of our worldly possessions. A few sets of clothes, some worn paperbacks, a faded photograph of a mother and father we couldn't remember, and a formal-looking envelope given to us that morning by the home's director, Mrs. Gable. "Well," Alara said, her voice tight. She was always the practical one, the one who kept her emotions packed down deep, like socks in an overstuffed suitcase. "That's that." She looked back at the grim brick building, its windows like 100 vacant eyes. I couldn't look. I was afraid if I did, some invisible cord would snap me back inside, back to the known world of beige hallways and the smell of industrial cleaner. I kept my eyes fixed on the bus stop down the street. It seemed a mile away. Each step toward it felt like walking on a wire suspended over a great, empty canyon. We were 18 today, adults. The system was done with us. It had fed us, clothed us, and educated us to a point. Now it had politely, firmly shown us the door. The world was supposed to be ours for the taking, but all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest. We had no one, no family to call, no couch to crash on, just each other and the letter in my hand. The bus ride was a blur of unfamiliar suburbs. Manicured lawns and two-car garages slid past the window, a diorama of a life so alien it might as well have been on another planet. Alara stared out the window, her reflection a pale ghost, superimposed over the passing homes. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from a lawyer we'd never met, a Mr. Alistair Henderson, and a one-way bus ticket to a town I'd only ever seen on a map. Havenwood. The letter was dense with legal terms, but the gist was simple. Our uncle, Arthur Vance, our mother's brother, had died 2 years ago. We were his only living relatives. He had left us his property, a small farmhouse and 10 acres of land on the outskirts of town. For a moment, a tiny, fragile flicker of hope ignited in my chest. A house, a home, a place that was ours. Then I read the next paragraph, and the flicker was extinguished by a flood of ice. The property came with a significant burden, a massive lien for back taxes, penalties, and interest, totaling nearly $50,000. The county was set to seize the property and auction it off in 90 days. $50,000, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. Alara turned from the window, her expression unreadable. She took the letter from my hand and read it, her lips a thin, hard line. "Of course," she said, her voice flat. "Of course, there's a catch. There's always a catch." She folded the letter with sharp, angry precision and handed it back to me. "So we have a house we can't afford, and land we'll never set foot on. It's a joke." I shook my head, though I wasn't sure why. "Maybe not. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, He says in the postscript that he strongly advises we come to Havenwood to discuss our options before making any decisions. He included his office address. Alara let out a short, bitter laugh. Options? Leo, what options? We have $400 between us. That's our parting gift from the state. We can't pay $50,000. The only option is to let them take it. Maybe the lawyer wants to get us to sign some papers so he can get his fee. The hope, however foolish, refused to die completely. But why would he pay for our bus tickets? Why would he care? It's our uncle's land, our mother's brother. It's the only thing we have. She looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw the fear behind her hardened exterior, the same fear that was clawing at my own throat. We were twins, bound by a shared history of loss and institutional silence. We'd learned to communicate without words, to read the subtle shifts in each other's posture, the tightening of a jaw, the flicker of an eye. In her eyes, I saw the terror of the unknown, the crushing weight of being utterly terrifyingly alone. "It's just a piece of dirt, Leo," she said softly, her voice losing its edge. "A broken-down house and some dirt we've never seen. It's not a home." But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was wrong. It had to be more than that. An uncle we barely remembered, a man who had never once visited us in all those years at St. Jude's, had left us something. It felt like a message, a final cryptic word from a past we never knew. I had to know what it was. The bus rumbled on, carrying us deeper into the countryside, away from the city that had been our cage, and toward a place that could be our salvation, or our final disappointment. The sun began to set, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. The neat suburban houses gave way to rolling hills and dense forests. The world outside the window grew darker, wilder. It felt like we were traveling back in time, to a place where the modern world hadn't quite reached. Mr. Henderson's office was on the main street of Havenwood, a small, unassuming brick building wedged between a hardware store and a bakery. The town itself felt like a relic, old storefronts with faded paint, a single traffic light that blinked yellow after 9 p.m., and a sense of quiet that was almost unnerving after the constant noise of the city. Mr. Henderson was a man who seemed to fit the town perfectly. He was older, with kind, weary eyes and a tweed jacket that had seen better days. He didn't look like a lawyer who was trying to get his fee. He looked like a man carrying a weight. He shook our hands, his grip firm and reassuring, and gestured for us to sit in the 2 worn leather chairs opposite his massive oak desk. The office smelled of old paper, pipe tobacco, and something else. Maybe rain. "Leo, Alara," he began, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "I'm glad you came. I was your uncle's attorney and his friend." He paused, looking at us as if trying to see our uncle in our faces. "I know this is a difficult situation. The letter, I'm afraid, doesn't tell the whole story. It never can." He explained the situation again, but with more detail, more humanity. The tax debt was real, and it was substantial. The county was not known for its leniency. He told us that a developer, a company called Northwood Holdings, had already made a formal offer to the county to buy the property for the exact amount of the lien. It was a clean, simple solution. We could sign the papers, walk away with nothing, but be free of the burden. "It's what most people in your position would do," he said, his eyes holding ours. "No one would blame you." Alara shifted in her chair. "So we came all this way for you to tell us to sign a piece of paper and leave?" Her voice was sharp with suspicion. Mr. Henderson held up a hand. "No. I came all this way to tell you that your uncle Arthur loved you very much, and he would have wanted you to see the place before you let it go." He slid a large tarnished brass key across the desk. It was ornate, old-fashioned, and heavy in my palm. That's the key to the front door. I also have a small box he left in your names. He instructed me to give it to you only if you came here in person." He retrieved a small, plain wooden box from a drawer and placed it next to the key. It was locked with a simple clasp. My heart started to beat a little faster. This was it. The message. "What's in it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Mr. Henderson replied honestly. His instructions were clear. "For you two only." He also left this. He handed me a folded, hand-drawn map. It showed the route from town to the property, about 3 miles out. A small X was marked on a spot labeled the Vance Place. Arthur was a complicated man, the lawyer continued, his gaze distant. He wasn't a bad man, Alara. He was a proud one, and a private one. He got dealt a bad hand after your parents passed, and he made some choices. Maybe not the right ones, but he always thought he was doing what was best. Alara said nothing. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, a wall of skepticism and hurt. I understood. Why hadn't he come for us? Why leave us in that place for 18 years, only to leave us a debt-ridden piece of land after he was gone? It felt like a cruel, posthumous joke. But holding that heavy key, looking at that mysterious box, I couldn't accept that. There was more to the story. I knew it. "We'll go see it," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Alara shot me a look, a mix of exasperation and concern, but she didn't argue. Maybe she felt it too, a tiny pull toward the unknown, a need to see the final chapter of this sad family story for herself. The taxi dropped us at the end of a long, overgrown gravel driveway. The driver, a talkative local named George, wished us luck with a look of pity in his eyes. "Arthur's place," he'd said, shaking his head. "Hasn't been anyone up there in years. He was a good man, Arthur, kept to himself, but a good man." The words echoed in the silence as the taxi's taillights disappeared down the road. We were alone. The air was different here. It smelled of damp earth, pine needles, and wild, growing things. The sun was low in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like specters among the trees. The driveway was more of a suggestion than a road. 2 faint ruts disappearing into a tunnel of overarching oak and maple trees. We started walking, our duffel bags slung over our shoulders, the silence broken only by the crunch of our footsteps on the gravel and the distant call of a crow. After a quarter of a mile, the trees opened up, and we saw it. The house. Alara was right. It was a ruin. A 2-story farmhouse that might have been charming a century ago, but was now surrendering to the slow, relentless siege of nature. The white paint was peeling in long, leprous strips, revealing weathered gray wood beneath. The porch roof sagged dangerously in the middle, and several windows were boarded up. A massive oak tree, ancient and gnarled, stood sentinel beside it, its branches like skeletal arms reaching for the roof. But despite the decay, it had a strange, haunting beauty. It wasn't just an abandoned building, it was a place that had been lived in, a place that held memories. It had a soul. And next to the house, about 30 feet from the porch, was the well. It was made of fieldstones stacked in a perfect circle, with a simple wooden roof over it, gray and splintered with age. It looked ancient, like something out of a fairy tale. A dark, gaping mouth in the earth. A shiver traced its way down my spine. "Well," Alara said, her voice soft, all the fight gone out of it. "It's something." "It's ours," I said, though the word felt foreign on my tongue. We walked up the creaking porch steps, avoiding the spot that looked ready to collapse. I put the heavy brass key into the lock. It turned with a rusty, protesting screech, and the door swung inward into darkness. The air that rushed out was stale and cold, thick with the dust of years. It was the smell of forgotten things, of time standing still. We stepped inside, crossing a threshold not just into a house, but into the mystery of the man who was our uncle and the life he had hidden from us. The inside of the house was a time capsule. Everything was covered in a thick blanket of dust, and cobwebs draped from the corners of the ceiling like ghostly lace. But beneath the neglect, the furniture was still in place. A worn armchair by the fireplace, a sturdy wooden table in the kitchen, a bookshelf filled with leaning, dusty spines. It looked as if someone had just walked out one day and never come back. It was eerie, but it was also profoundly sad. We moved through the downstairs rooms in silence, our footsteps echoing in the stillness. Sunlight, thick with dancing dust motes, streamed through the dirty windows, illuminating the decay. In the living room, above the stone fireplace, was a gallery of empty picture hooks. The photos were gone. All of them. It was a deliberate act, a life erased from its own walls. Why would he take down all the pictures, Ilara wondered aloud, tracing a clean square in the dust where a frame once hung? I didn't have an answer, didn't. It was another piece of the puzzle, another question without a solution. We sat down at the kitchen table, the wooden box Mr. Henderson had given us between us. The silence of the house pressed in on us. It wasn't an empty silence, it was a heavy, expectant one, as if the house itself was waiting for us, holding its breath. I looked at Ilara. Her face was pale in the dim light, her expression a mixture of fear, grief, and a reluctant curiosity she couldn't quite hide. It was time. I took a small pocket knife from my bag and pried open the simple clasp on the box. The lid creaked open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was not money, not jewelry, not some precious heirloom. It was another key. This one was smaller, iron and rusted, and beneath it a single folded piece of stationery, yellowed with age. I picked it up. The handwriting was masculine, strong, but a little shaky. It was a letter. From him. I unfolded it carefully, my hands trembling slightly. "My dearest Leo and Ilara," I began to read aloud, my voice sounding strange and loud in the quiet room. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone and you have come home. I know you have questions. I know you must hate me. I don't blame you. I made a promise to your mother, my sister, on the day she died, a promise to protect you, and everything I have done, every choice I have made, has been to keep that promise. The world is not a kind place, and it was less kind to our family than most. Leaving you at St. Jude's was the hardest thing I have ever done, but I believed it was the only way to keep you safe, to keep you invisible from people who would have harmed you. I couldn't be a part of your lives, but I never stopped watching over you. This house, this land, it is your birthright, but it is also in danger. The key in this box is not for a door in this house. It is for a lockbox. A lockbox hidden in a place I knew no one would ever think to look. A place of deep memory, the well. Do not be afraid of it. It has been dry for 50 years. At the bottom, under the loose stones, you will find what you need to begin. Be careful. Trust Mr. Henderson, and know that I loved you, always. Your Uncle Arthur. The letter fell from my fingers onto the dusty table. Ilara stared at it, her eyes wide with a storm of conflicting emotions. Safe? He'd left us in that place for 18 years to keep us safe. From what? From whom? The letter answered one question only to create a dozen more. "The well," Ilara whispered, her eyes drifting towards the kitchen window, which looked out over the side yard where the stone structure stood. It was no longer just a well. It was a hiding place, a place of deep memory. I stood up, my mind racing. This was it. This was the start of the real story. Not the story of a deadbeat uncle who abandoned his family, but something far more complex, more dangerous. We had to know what was down there. We found an old rope in the barn, thick and dusty but still strong, and a powerful flashlight in a kitchen drawer, its batteries miraculously still holding a charge. As dusk settled over the property, casting the world in a soft, gray light, we stood at the edge of the well. I peered over the stone lip. The beam of the flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a circular stone shaft that descended about 20 feet. It was dry, just as the letter had said. The bottom was a mess of dirt, leaves, and loose field stones. "I'll go," I said, before Alara could object. I was bigger, stronger. It had to be me. She held the rope, her knuckles white, her face a mask of anxiety. "Be careful, Leo, please." I tied the rope securely around the base of the old oak tree, tested it with all my weight, and then, taking a deep breath, I began my descent. The stones were cold and damp against my hands. The air grew cooler, smelling of earth and stone and secrets. My feet touched the bottom with a soft thud. I was standing in the heart of the mystery. I shone the light around the circular floor. It was just as it appeared from above, rocks and debris. Under the loose stones, Arthur's words echoed in my mind. I started kicking at the rocks, pushing them aside. Most were embedded in the hard-packed dirt, but then my boot hit one that shifted, making a hollow clunking sound. I knelt, my heart pounding in my chest. I dug my fingers into the dirt around it and pulled. It came free, revealing not more dirt, but a dark, square hole. And in that hole, there was a metal box. It was an old military-style ammunition can, painted black, with a sturdy latch on the front. I lifted it out. It was heavy, heavier than it should be. "I found it!" I yelled up to Alara. "Pull me up!" Getting out with the heavy box was harder than going down, but with Alara pulling from above and me scrambling for purchase on the stone walls, I made it, collapsing on the grass, breathing heavily, the metal box clutched to my chest. We carried it back into the kitchen, a sense of sacred ceremony in our movements. We placed it on the table, the dust of the well clinging to its surface. There was a small hasp for a padlock, but it was unlocked. I took another deep breath, looked at Alara, and I lifted the latch. The lid opened with a metallic groan. We both leaned in, peering into the darkness. The first thing I saw was money, stacks of it, $100 bills bound in rubber bands. More money than I had ever seen in my life. But beneath the money, there was something else, a thick, leather-bound journal, and under that, a stack of envelopes tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Letters, more letters. I lifted out the journal. Its cover was worn smooth with use. I opened it to the first page, the same strong, slightly shaky handwriting. The date was from just after our parents died. It was our uncle's story, his confession, his explanation, and as I read the first few lines aloud, I knew that the $50,000 tax bill was the least of our problems. The truth was buried here, in this box, and it was about to change everything we thought we knew about our lives, our family, and the very ground beneath our feet. "They said it was a car accident," I read, my voice trembling as I recited Arthur's words from the journal. "A slick road, a foggy night. But I never believed it. Your father, he wasn't a reckless man. He was involved in something to do with this land. He'd been approached by a man, a representative from a development firm even back then. They wanted this property badly. He refused. A week later, he and your mother were gone." Alara sank into a chair, her face ashen. The kitchen was dark now, the only light coming from the flashlight we'd propped up on the counter, its beam creating a stark, dramatic circle on the table around the box and its contents. "What does he mean?" she whispered. "What was Dad involved in?" I kept reading. The journal entries were sporadic, spanning nearly 2 decades. They painted a picture of a man living in constant fear. After our parents' death, Arthur had inherited the property, and with it, the unwanted attention of the development company. They weren't just any developers, they were ruthless, connected, and they didn't take no for an answer. They used threats, intimidation, and legal loopholes to acquire land they wanted. Arthur believed they were responsible for our parents' accident. His paranoia grew, and so did his desperation. He knew they would see two orphaned children as easy prey. He couldn't raise us here. It would be painting a target on our backs. So he made an impossible choice. He hid us in plain sight in the state system, severing all official ties so no one could connect us to the Vance land. He became a ghost, working odd jobs for cash, living off the grid, all while watching us from a distance. The journal described his lonely vigils, parking his old truck near the schoolyard at St. Jude's just to catch a glimpse of us playing at recess. It detailed every dollar he saved, every sacrifice he made. The money in the box wasn't from some illicit source. It was his life's savings, scraped together over 18 years, intended for us. It was our inheritance, hidden from a world he believed would steal it. There was over $100,000 in the box, enough to pay the tax lien twice over with plenty to spare. Alara started to cry, silent tears tracking paths through the dust on her cheeks. These weren't tears of sadness, but of a profound, wrenching understanding. The anger she'd held against him for so long was dissolving, replaced by a wave of grief for the life he'd lost, for the loneliness he must have endured. He hadn't abandoned us. He had sacrificed his entire life to protect us. He was here, she choked out, all that time. He was watching us. I put my arm around her, the weight of his words settling over us both. We were not orphans in the way we had thought. We had been loved, fiercely and secretly, by a man who had given up everything for us. But the story didn't end there. The last few entries in the journal were more frantic. The development company, now operating under the name Northwood Holdings, had resurfaced. They had found him. They were pressuring him again, this time using the county and the tax system as their weapon. They had local officials in their pocket, and they had manufactured the massive tax lien, piling on fraudulent fees and penalties to create a debt so large he could never pay it. It was a legal, sanitized way to steal the land. His final entry was chilling. They are closing in. I don't have much time. I've gathered everything. The proof of their fraud, the original deeds, everything. It's all here. If they get to me, they will never find it. The truth is in the well. The truth is your only weapon. Don't let them take our home. Don't let them win. Fight. That was it. The last entry. He had died not long after, officially, of a heart attack, but now we couldn't be sure. We sat in the silence, the weight of his final command settling upon us. He hadn't just left us a home and some money. He had left us a fight, his fight, and it was now ours. This is the point in the story where everything shifts, where the ground beneath you falls away, and you're left with a choice that will define who you are. Have you ever been there, a moment where a truth is revealed that changes your entire past and therefore your entire future? It's a terrifying, disorienting feeling. Suddenly, the simple story you told yourself about your life is gone, replaced by a much more complicated, much more painful, and much more meaningful one. For us, the anger and the feeling of abandonment were gone, but in their place was this heavy sense of duty, of a legacy we never knew we had. If you've made it this far, thank you. This story is about more than just a house. It's about the secrets families keep to protect each other, and the cost of that protection. If this is resonating with you, if you've ever had to uncover a difficult family truth, I want you to know you're not alone. Let me know in the comments, just a simple, I get it. This community is for all of us who have had to dig through the past to find our future. Now, let's get back to that kitchen, because the fight was just beginning. The next morning, we woke up on the dusty floor of the living room, wrapped in old blankets we'd found in a cedar chest. The sun was streaming in, and for the first time, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt waiting. It felt like hours. We spent the day going through the rest of the box. The letters, the ones tied with the blue ribbon, were from our mother to Arthur, written in the years before she died. They were full of life and laughter, of inside jokes and sisterly affection. They spoke of her love for our father and her dreams for us. Reading them was like meeting her for the first time. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking experience. We finally had a piece of her, a piece of them, but there was another set of documents at the very bottom of the box, tucked inside a waterproof oilskin pouch. These were the weapons Arthur had written about. There were original property deeds dating back to our great-grandfather. There were signed affidavits from other landowners in the area who had been harassed and lowballed by Northwood Holdings, and there was a small ledger detailing payments from Northwood to a shell corporation that, with a little digging, we realized was connected to the county tax assessor. It was the proof. The smoking gun. Our uncle had spent years building a case against them, and he had hidden it all away for us. We knew what we had to do. We called Mr. Henderson. When we told him what we'd found, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, his voice thick with emotion, "Arthur, you magnificent, stubborn old fool. He actually did it. He told us to stay put, not to talk to anyone, and that he would be out to the property in an hour." While we waited, a sleek black car we didn't recognize rolled up the driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was smooth, polished, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Davies, a representative from Northwood Holdings. He said he'd heard we were in town and wanted to extend his condolence. He didn't know we'd already found the box. I felt a surge of cold fury. This man, his company, they had destroyed our family. They had haunted our uncle to his grave. And now he was standing on our porch, offering us blood money. "We're not interested," I said, my voice steady. Mr. Davies' smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I think you should reconsider," he said, his tone hardening slightly. "This is a one-time offer. The county auction is in less than 3 months. You'll get nothing then." "We'll take our chances," Alara said, her voice like ice. She stood beside me, no longer the scared girl from the bus, but a woman made of steel. We were a united front, the Vance twins. He stared at us for a long moment, his eyes cold and calculating. He was reassessing us. We weren't the scared, ignorant orphans he'd expected. He gave a curt nod, turned without another word, got back in his car, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The threat was no longer veiled. It was out in the open. The battle lines had been drawn. When Mr. Henderson arrived, his face was grim. We showed him everything, the journal, the letters, the ledger, the affidavits. He spread the documents out on the dusty kitchen table, his lawyer's eye scanning each page with a growing sense of awe and fury. This is dynamite," he breathed. "Arthur collected everything we need. This ledger. It proves bribery, conspiracy, fraud. This is a criminal case, not just a civil one." He looked up at us, his expression serious. "But you need to understand what this means. If we use this, we're not just fighting a development company. We're fighting a corrupt system. They will fight back. They will try to discredit you, to intimidate you. It could get ugly." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "There is another option. You have the money your uncle left. You could quietly pay the fraudulent tax bill. They would have no legal grounds to seize the property then. You could live here, fix the place up, and they would likely leave you alone. It would be safer. You wouldn't have to go through a fight that could drag on for years." It was the ultimate choice, the easy wrong or the harder right. We could take the safe path, use the money to secure our home, and let the injustice stand. We could live our lives in peace, but we would be living with the knowledge that we had let them get away with it. We would be dishonoring our uncle's sacrifice. Or we could fight. We could use the truth he had died to protect and seek justice, not just for us, but for him and for our parents. But it would mean putting ourselves in the crosshairs of the very people who had destroyed our family. Alara looked at me, and I saw the answer in her eyes before she even spoke. The fear was still there, but beneath it was a bedrock of resolve. We had spent our entire lives being powerless, being pushed around by systems we didn't understand. For the first time, we had power. We had the truth. "We fight," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. I nodded. "We fight." Mr. Henderson looked at us both, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "Arthur would be proud. Your parents would be proud. Let's get to work." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal strategy and quiet preparation. We stayed at the farmhouse, living a strange, suspended existence. We cleaned the dust of years from the rooms, letting in the light and air. We worked in the overgrown garden, pulling weeds and discovering the faint outlines of our mother's old flower beds. We were slowly, tentatively, making it our home. With every floorboard we scrubbed, with every window we washed, we felt our connection to the place and to our family growing stronger. Mr. Henderson handled the legal side. He filed a lawsuit against Northwood Holdings and filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office, presenting them with copies of Arthur's evidence. The response was immediate. Northwood's lawyers filed a countersuit, claiming we were attempting to extort them. They publicly accused our uncle of being a disgruntled, paranoid eccentric. They tried to paint us as opportunistic children trying to cash in on a conspiracy theory. It was exactly as Mr. Henderson had predicted. They were trying to bury us in legal fees and public ridicule. There were moments of doubt, of course. Late at night, the old house would groan and settle, and I would lie awake, the fear creeping back in. We were two young adults with no resources other than our uncle's hidden cash, up against a multi-million-dollar corporation. The odds were impossible. But then I would think of Arthur's journal, of his lonely vigils outside our school, and my resolve would harden again. We weren't just fighting for land. We were fighting for his memory. The turning point came when a reporter from a major state newspaper got a whiff of the story. She was a tough, investigative journalist who specialized in exposing corporate and political corruption. Mr. Henderson, with our permission, gave her the story. She spent a week in Havenwood interviewing us, interviewing the other families Arthur had documented, digging into Northwood's history. The article was published on a Sunday on the front page. It was a bombshell. The Havenwood Conspiracy, how a predatory developer and corrupt officials targeted a family for generations. It laid out the whole sordid story, the suspicious accident, the fraudulent tax lien, the bribery. Arthur's ledger was the centerpiece of the article. Public outcry was swift and fierce. The state attorney general, who had been dragging his feet, was suddenly forced to announce a full-scale investigation. Northwood Holdings panicked. Their stock price plummeted. The county officials named in the ledger were suspended pending investigation. The facade of respectable business had crumbled, revealing the rotten core beneath. A week later, Mr. Davies and the company's lawyers requested a meeting. It wasn't in a fancy boardroom. It was in Mr. Henderson's small, cluttered office. The power dynamic had completely shifted. They were no longer the predators. They were the prey. They offered to drop their countersuit. They offered to pay the tax lien in full. They offered us a settlement, a significant sum of money, in exchange for our silence and dropping our own lawsuit. Mr. Henderson advised us to consider it. A settlement would mean a guaranteed win, money to secure our future, and an end to the fight. Going to trial would be risky, expensive, and emotionally draining, with no guarantee of victory. It was another choice. Take the money and the win or push for full public justice. Alara and I talked it over that night, sitting on the porch of the house that was now truly ours. The air was cool and smelled of pine and damp earth. 1,000,000 stars were scattered across the black velvet sky, more stars than we had ever seen in the city. "I don't want their money," Alara said finally, her voice soft but firm. "It feels dirty. I just want them to admit what they did. I want Arthur's name cleared. I want everyone to know he wasn't a paranoid old man. He was a hero." I felt the same way. This was never about money. It was about truth. We told Mr. Henderson our decision. We rejected the settlement. We would see them in court. But we never had to. Faced with a PR nightmare, a criminal investigation, and a trial we were determined to see through, Northwood Holdings folded. They issued a public statement, a carefully worded non-apology that admitted to accounting irregularities and aggressive acquisition tactics. They fired the executives involved, including Mr. Davies. The county quietly dropped the tax lien against our property, citing clerical errors. The corrupt tax assessor was charged and eventually convicted. We didn't get the dramatic courtroom confession we saw in movies, but we got something better. We got our home, free and clear. We got our uncle's name restored. We got justice, quiet and imperfect, but real. The story doesn't end there with a perfect happy ending. The scars are still there. We live with the ghost of what was stolen from us, our childhood, our parents, our uncle. The house still needs a lot of work. The roof leaks when it rains and the winters are cold. But every nail we hammer, every wall we paint, is an act of defiance and reclamation. We are rebuilding what was broken. We used some of our uncle's money to start the repairs, and we both got jobs in town. Alara is working at the local library, surrounded by the stories she loves. I'm working with a carpenter, learning how to build, how to restore, learning how to create rather than just survive. We're part of Havenwood now, the locals who once saw us as the strange orphans who inherited the cursed Vance place now treat us with a quiet respect. They know our story. They know what we fought for. We brought our family's photos back to the house. We found them in a trunk in the attic where Arthur had carefully stored them. We hung them back on the walls, filling the empty spaces above the fireplace. Our parents, our uncle, us as babies, we are all here together in our home. Sometimes I go out and stand by the well. It's just a stone circle in the yard, its purpose served. But to me, it's a monument. It's a symbol of the depths you have to go to find the truth and the secrets people will keep to protect the ones they love. My uncle thought he was leaving us a fortress to hide in, but he left us something so much better. He left us a reason to fight, a place to stand, and a story to tell. And that's the most valuable inheritance of all. This journey taught me that home isn't just a place you are given. It's a place you choose, a place you build, and sometimes a place you have to fight for. It's built not just with wood and nails, but with truth and memory and love. What this story taught me, and what I want to leave with you, is that your past does not have to be your prison. The stories you were told about yourself, about your family, they might not be the whole truth. It's okay to dig. It's okay to search for your own story, because once you find it, you can start building your own home, whatever and wherever that may be. I want to thank you for listening, for being a part of this. If our story moved you, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're going to be sharing more stories here, stories about second chances, about finding belonging, and about the quiet battles that make us who we are. And I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me one thing you've had to fight for that defines who you are today. I'll be reading every single one, because every story matters, and every one of us deserves a place to call home.